results, more time to definitely take sense. So when we have this continuous switch, what are we going to see? We're going to see somebody doing this amazing thing, and then we're going to have another president who's like, yeah, that's great, but let's abandon that. I want to do something else. Where are we going to see the sustained benefits not accepted at this time? Moving on to my next point, the president has certain powers to directly choose executives, and this can lead to some amount of nepotism in the executive branch that is, and we would then have an executive branch that is more considered with, because if you are a president and you give these executive posts to like previous business partners or your relatives or associates that you know, they will be more concerned with pleasing you other than actually stimulating innovation, challenging ideas, and working towards achieving the best possible outcome for the nation accepted.
Reminding the opposition that in your current system of government, this is prevalent because the Prime Minister appoints his ministers based on public favoritism or any willy-nilly reason that he sees fit on your side of the house.
Well, that will also be prevalent, if not more so, on your side of the house. I also want to mention that there can very well be deadlocks between the executive and legislative branches, and this can lead to a still in progress when it leads to passing laws or doing things that actually benefit the country, especially if you have certain persons who want to who are on opposing parties, who want to oppose something being done. We see where there is a back and forth, not necessarily genuinely wanting to hold the executive branch accountable, but simply because they do not want to see them implement certain things. So this can lead to waste of time, policies that are not implemented after several years, and it is with seeing all of this that the opposition rests.
I would like to thank the Deputy Leader of the Opposition for closing the debate. In opening half, and I'd like to welcome the government member to begin the debate in closing half. Members of the audience, please be mindful of the volume at which you chit-chat, because you can hear you and it can be distracting. Trevon, you have 7 minutes.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In the interest of timekeeping, I would like to start my speech in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Panel, I seem to believe that we have lost the spirit of the debate. The focus of the debate is not to argue if democracy is going to be lost on one side. It's not arguing the idea of term limits and the longevity of ideologies. It's not to discuss the whole permanence of how can we get ideas to go happening over time and how these laws are created. What the debate should be centered on, focused on, is the presidential republic system effective and can it be implemented? Not even if it can be implemented, but moreover of the principal basis of is it suitable within our status quo to implement. Now, with that said, the arguments proposed by the opening opposition, when it came about to saying that democracy would be lost on their side and how that change is needed, and they agreed to that and how that instead of doing all of this, we need to improve parliamentary structures. But what we're saying on our side of the house, that this is happening. We are trying to improve parliamentary structures. This has failed. We're not seeing any significant improvement in this timeline or with the same implementation. We're not going to see it in our future timeline. What we're trying to prove on this side of the house is trying to get to the bottom of the situation. what is the real motivation that our government have in getting elected? They're being motivated to win seats, but they're not winning seats to help in their constituencies. They're winning seats to ensure that they have a salary from their prime minister. They're winning seats to ensure that they can have ministerial appointments, and that will not exist on our side of the house. Now, the opposition came with some arguments that were really problematic in nature, and just to look at them and the fact that they're saying that there will be no resources to change. Now, even if I take that argument as its best case, we have seen time and time again in Jamaica, in our status quo, where we're desperately trying to eliminate the colonial agenda. And we have made resources fly out of the air to remove things from resident magistrate to parish judge. We have done things to implement Ministry of Constitutional Reform. So if there are resources commit to doing these things similar to that track, the argument of resources to do something so big isn't really good, because there's still a will and demand to do it anyways. More importantly, and a very problematic argument, and the last one I will tackle, the issue of nepotism existing on our side of the house with presidential republic systems. We don't believe in that argument. We recognize that we, as an executive, will be appointed by the president in commission with their party. It's the same thing in now without the presidential republic system. There will be no significant change, but what there will be on our side of the house is that the legislative branch would have to be confirming these appointments. And therefore, there's greater checks and balances to prevent cronyism and nepotism. Now, we as a legislative body can see if someone is being appointed because they're only friends with the person, the legislation or the legislative body can deny the confidence accepted, deny the confirmation of that official. There's actually more accountability on our side when you think about it, ladies and gentlemen. I move into my substantive material. Now, we're going to be talking about a cost-benefit analysis of what happens in the presidential republic system. More in-depth than what was presented from the opening half to show you what are the positive ramifications. We're going to be talking about agenda-setting reform in the legislation or creation. We're going to be talking about how we're going to be focusing on actual solutions and not parties, and presenting a culture of non-partisanship. And lastly, we're going to talk about how having active MPs in their local systems and how it's working out to prevent barred constituencies. But I want to start off with barred constituencies. In this model, the separation of executive powers allows for us to actually have ministers who are not members of parliament. Anecdotally, we all see the wonderful ministers doing their ministerial things and forget that they actually have a constituency to take care of. On our side of the house, and only on our half of this house, we're examining the idea that ministers are not able to do both ministerial work and member of parliamentary work. And even to go further onto that analysis, we're allowing for ministers to be focused in what they need to be doing. Being the Minister of Health, being the Member of Parliament needs to be a separate job. Now, even in going into that analysis, we realize that it prevents abandoning the constituencies, where ministers only come back or they take up strongholds that they're already politically tribal, but they take up the whole idea of coming back every election time to fix the 1-2 roads and then cut again to get their ministerial positions. We're preventing that on our side of the house, and it's a unique benefit. Now, even in our side of the house, we're preventing a conflict of interest in legislature with the executive. The colluding fact that the Minister of Tourism going to be able to put in laws about tourism without check and balances because all of his parties with him, that is something that would not exist in a presidential republic model. There needs to be adequate checks and balances from the opposition to examine if this policy is really in the interest of the government and its people rather than the political party and their sponsors. Now, we can go on and on into this example, but I will take that point of information now.
So aren't the policies of the government in this system checked by the opposition in the House of
But the power is weaker, because in this scenario, you can have an executive from one party and a legislation ruling in another. Therefore, you can have PMP being in charge of going to the House and JLP being the Prime Minister. That is even more check and balances, because no, JLP cannot do anything unless PMP properly sees that it makes sense. And if the roles were flipped, it will be the same. What we're providing on our house is accountability and transparency. What you need to show me on your side of the house is how we're going to get that same in the old system. More importantly, and we move on very quickly into the cost-benefit analysis, is that in this same legislation creation, we're seeing a change in agenda setting. And that's your second substantive. In Jamaica, agenda setting is described by the people who are the ruling point of it. They're not accepted. They're the people who are going to decide what the critical issues are. They're going to decide to fix the tax, the traffic act, as opposed to the Violence Against Women Act and the Domestic Violence Act. They're the ones who are going to decide what is really discussed in the agenda of Parliament. But But if we have a system where opposition has a stronger role, we get a greater representation of the wants of the demographic of the people. 2, we get diversification of ideologies and allowing for these to have participation of conflicting ideologies to make compromises in the system. More importantly, we're bringing new thoughts into governance, ladies and gentlemen. And lastly, when we have MPs working on their local systems instead of just trying to get the seat for their prime ministers, they're forced, and there will be public backlash to ensure that they stay in their seats to do what the people want them to do. They'll be forced to represent, and persons will be having an increase in their ability to choose. Because now I can choose my MP and choose my president separately. And that is a problem, because a lot of times we have to sacrifice having a horrible MP just to get the prime minister or the president that we want. Now with that said, on the last point, we're going to look into the whole summary, and my whip will go ahead and collate all of this to show you why on our side there's more benefits, there's more good than harm that they're going to try to present on a collective. Well, we thank you so much for your time, and this is the side government. Thank you.
I would like to thank the member of government for that contribution and welcome the member of opposition to respond. She doesn't have 7 minutes to hear.
Commencing my time in 3, 2, 1. Panel opponents, teammates, pleasant afternoon to you all as well, audience. Now, before I begin, I'd just like to point out to the panel something that was made mention of. And there is this assumption that we're here today, or we're called here today to debate whether or not Jamaica is going to move to a first past the post system, or whether we go, well, whether we're going to get rid of first past the post, or whether we'll start having proportional representation. But that is not what the motion is here today. The speaker before me just now spoke to you about the fact that we're going to have MPs different from people who are responsible, as if we're going to now start having a Congress separate from a Senate and they will have cabinet meetings. That's not the motion here. That's not what we're called here to debate. The motion here is whether or not we should have a presidential Republican system. That is whether or not we should have the legislature being separate from the overall government, and that is whether we should have a president who would no longer be responsible to the legislature. Now, we have a very unique system of separation of powers in our country, which is that not strict separation as it is in the United States, but separation wherein we have a form of committee existing between the branches. And what this allows is that the people of Jamaica are directly able to influence the laws of their parliament through their MPs. If it is that such a system as is being proposed now is to be had, then what we'll see happening is that, what we'll see happening is that we're going to have MPs being elected, but then they're not able to impact any form of legislation in the parliament. So what's the sense? What's their purpose? This undermines the whole purpose of our parliament, and it slows down our productivity. Now, to get into my first substantive, this policy, if it is to be followed, reduces the bureaucracy. That is, it will slow down the productivity of our government. Now, do you not accept it? Won't be accepting it for the next 2 minutes. Do you remember Barack Obama? And when Mitch McConnell and the entire Congress and Senate decided that they were going to there would be a fill block in the United States Congress and in the Senate that no legislation at all would be passed. Do you remember how people were excited for Barack Obama, the agenda, the first black president of the United States, that they saw that, oh, this man will come and make a lot of change for black people and for civil rights, etc. That was simply not done because there was a vendetta against him. And this is what happens in a presidential Republican system. When you take the power from the people, that is what will happen if the policy that is being put forward by the government is to be followed. Now, they spoke about progress and the fact that we have MPs that are not doing the work of the people. This will definitely be even more rampant. So if you're seeing it happening 1 and 2 times now, just imagine how prevalent it will be if their motion, if their policy is to be followed. Now we have to keep in mind that the legislature and the executive knows the needs of the people. So why should we take the power from the people? It makes absolutely no sense. The people on the ground, the MPs, should be the ones to take the necessary decisions and to be the ones in control of the runnings of the country. No, it's not accepted. Importantly, it promotes, if it is that we are to keep the current system, it promotes accountability. The system that they're putting forward now, imagine what is going to happen if it is that the president or the, as the motion states, the chosen amount of people are persons who are in line politically with the president. What will happen if it is that we have a president who has a corrupt agenda and this person somehow manages to maneuver the whole thing and to not accept it, to ensure that their people, the people who are to elect him are people who are in line with his political ideas. With this system, corruption is going to be even more rampant because it's much more difficult to get rid of this person. As the motion states, with a presidential Republican system, you can only remove a president except in extraordinary circumstances, extraordinary being the rarest of the rarest. Now look at what is happening in our parliament. I'm glad they pointed out the fact that, currently the prime minister and the government, they're deciding that, oh, no election, no local government election. Imagine the opposition can chide the government for doing so because they have the power to do so through the Constitution and through the representation of the People's Act. What will happen if you take this power? Not accepted. If you take this power from the people, accepted.
Just want to remind the member that the input slide basically states that the president leads an executive separate from the legislative branch.
Okay, thank you very much for pointing that out. Thank you very much. Moving on. Now, another important thing is the fact that it undermines democracy. It undermines democracy. How can the people then choose their representatives and these representatives have no power? It makes absolutely no sense. How is it that you're going to take one or two persons or say 15 persons and these persons not accepted? These persons are the ones that decide what is supposed to happen in the country. When it is going to be not accepted, it's going to now become much harder to get rid of these people. Come on now, ridiculous. Now, they make mention of the fact that we're now free from slavery, but you know what will happen? We will be free from slavery, but under their model will now be shackled to corruption. The people will be able to have a firmer grip on power. The president, that is, will have a firmer grip on power and his executive because you can only get them out in the rarest of circumstances. Come on now, it's common sense. And furthermore, since they're elected by chosen members of our society, as I pointed out earlier, what if they are able to choose the people who they want? These people are aligned with their political ideologies. Now, the fact is that there are multiple advantages to keeping the present system. Advantages that were not brought out or made obvious to you by opening house, which we would like to do now. And that is the fact that the partial separation of power gives us as a people a certain level of control. It gives us a certain level of influence over the policies of our country. Furthermore, and I would like to point out the fact that there is nothing wrong with continuous terms. Democracy is founded on the people choosing who they want to lead. All the people, not just a group of people, all the people. Thank you.
Opposition member for that contribution and welcome to the floor the government whip to the
Am I being heard clearly? Excellent. So for the purposes of time, I will be beginning in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and now. Mr. Speaker, esteemed ministers of this House, good afternoon to you all. Today's discussion is predicated on one fundamental premise, and that premise is adopting a presidential republican system in Jamaica. Now, we inside closing government have conclusively proven why the proposed system is not only a practicable approach, but also an imperative one with overwhelming advantages. Now, my sole objective today is to offer a succinct synopsis of the substantive argumentations and the clashes as it originated in this debate. I will also demonstrably show just why we here in closing government, my government member, has told me the debate away and won it conclusively. Now, there were several arguments that were brought forth by side government that were not necessarily quite substantiated, but were nonetheless appreciated. Now, the OG posited that we aim to remove the colonial agenda and that term limits are vital components of this new system, in addition to the fact that the present system without term limits is used as a vehicle for corruption. In contrast, the opening opposition posited that there's a loss of democracy and there's the possibility of abuse of presidential power. Now, to refute the loss of democracy point that was brought forth by the opening opposition, this point falls short, as presidential democracy is irrevocably intertwined with the very presidential republican system, rather. Is irrevocably intertwined with the very fabric of democracy from a fundamental perspective. Citizens vote separately for not only the president, but also for MPs and everyone else. Everyone is elected. That's a point that everyone on the opposition side of the bench had seemed to miss. Everyone is elected. No one is selected, it's elected, hence democracy. Now, this will lead to decentralization and also have the positive side effect of abolition of the first past the post system. We're not saying that we're aiming to focus exclusively on eradicating the first past the post system, but rather the substantive argument is that the abolition thereof is a positive ramification. Note the difference. Now, the opening half had the fundamental clash of democracy versus a better system of checks and balances. However, they skirted the issue that we brought forth in the closing side of conducting a cost-benefit analysis, determining why this is necessary and what it is that makes this a worthwhile avenue to pursue. They also failed to show how it would be effective, which we did. Now, the closing opposition had several postulates. They posited that they would establish committees to check laws, remove the presidential republican system would remove the voice of the people, we're free from slavery but shackled to corruption, and that the partial separation of powers would grant the people more power as opposed to a full separation of powers. Now, to review the first point, the status quo already has committees in place that check laws. Don't know if they're aware of this, but they do exist. However, the issue lies not in their existence, but rather in their efficacy, or to put it more clearly, the lack thereof. They're just not effective. Case in point, there's a major conflict, not accepted. There's a major conflict of interest in 2021, I believe, where Edmund Bartlett was reviewed as the head of a committee that was designed to provide accountability rather, to check for execution of projects done by the Ministry of Tourism, the ministry for which he was the minister. How does that make sense? How can you, under this system, check yourself?
Point of information.
Accepted.
So the simple solution to that is not appoint him at the head of the...
Which is precisely what we will be doing. Let the citizens appoint people. That's what we're saying. You're proving my point. Moving along. Now, the closing opposition has been fundamentally misconstruing the presidential system, and we here in the closing government have enumerated extensively a preponderance of substantives that show why we support Jamaica becoming a presidential republican system. We've not only extended the path of argumentation brought forth by the owning government, but we have also categorically won this debate. We identified several clashes. Now, my government member astutely conducted a cogent cost-benefit analysis that explored the positive externalities that would ensue from adoption of a presidential republican system. What separates us from the OG, who focused exclusively on term limits and removal of the colonial agenda, is our holistic analysis of the ramifications that would have positive effects in terms of Jamaican demographics. Now, the cost-benefit analysis assessed bipartisanship, the changing of the MP function, the reduction of the workload of ministers to prevent a barrier constituency, and I'll reiterate exactly what my achievement into. With respect to the bipartisanship aspect of the cost-benefit analysis, he illustrated that the new system allows for political collaboration. The focus is thus diverted from political parties and securing seats by winning constituencies, and instead directed towards a framework to develop policies predicated on the premise of compromise. That does not exist in the present system. And note clearly, opposition failed to address how compromise is achieved in the present system. The focus is thereby diverted to solutions, not parties, as is the case here. The JLP presently has a 49 to 14 seat majority, and as a consequence, given that they have more than the required 2/3, they can pass any single bill into an act as they desire, because they have a majority, a small majority at that. In this system, such things will not exist. There will definitively be accountability. That's our word. Accountability. Transparency. Now, This also allows for independent legislators to have some impact on legislative action. In the present system, independent legislators who run for office tend not to have much of an impact. You had a notorious contest, I believe his name was Ryan Chung a few years ago, during the last election, who didn't win a seat. In our system, anyone can win, irrespective of belonging to a party or being an independent. Transparency. Now, there's also a focus on the MP function changing, and this leads positive externalities of MPs focusing exclusively on the constituency development without ministerial portfolios. This means that focus is diverted again from winning seats, and there's pressure imposed on them, thereby to focus on constituency development. And also, persons are thereby more enfranchised and empowered to have more options in governance. Lastly, it reduces the workload of ministers and prevents by constituencies. Under the parliamentary system, which allows non-performing ministers to shelter under the skirts of the actually performing ministers, the presidential system makes it easier for an effective minister to be identified and singled out for blame or even dismissal. His dismissal will not affect other ministers or even in the extreme make a government collapse. His focus will thereby be exclusively on ministerial portfolio. That is why we, on site housing government, have conclusively won this debate. We've achieved several objectives that the opening half, the upper house, did not even consider. They didn't even contemplate these. Our argumentation and clashes ultimately won over the arguments posited by the closing opposition as well. We identified the core clashes, conducted a vital cost-benefit analysis, and deliberated in detail the positive externalities that will result from the adoption of the system. Republicanism in Jamaica, the presidential Republican system, is the way to go. The closing government rests.
For that contribution, we welcome the opposition to close off the debate.
Alright, I will begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. We'll go into the main clashes of the debate. So the government wants to tell us that it will reduce corruption by implementing a Republican system. They also tell us that the system will be more bipartisan. They tell us that MPs and ministries will be separated and that will be a more effective government. And they tell us we'll have more compromise. So let's look at that first one. It will reduce corruption. So let's go again to the penultimate republic. What happened last year when Trump was in power? Who were the people that were advising him? His daughter, his son, his daughter's wife, husband, his son's wife. Those were the people that were advising him. Those were the people he put to advise him. So how does that remove nepotism? Is that not nepotism by definition? When you have MPs, the only person you can choose or the person you have to use to make up your cabinet, your parliament, are MPs elected by the people. Right? So how do you get nepotism in there? Or unless your son is running for a seat. Accepted, go ahead.
So if it is that Trump had such autonomy, how is it then that he was thereby impeached? Explain that to me.
Thank you very
Using
much.
the legislative branch, how was he impeached?
Thank you. So Trump was impeached, yet remained in power for how many years after the impeachment? And his second impeachment? What would happen? So let's look at a different parliament. Let's look at the United Kingdom, where this all started as well, the penultimate parliament. What happened when Boris Johnson was having parties during COVID? What did they do? They ran him out of office. What happened when his replacement was not meeting the bar, when he was not carrying up to the book? They ran her out of office. What is going to happen when the new person is not meeting the bar? They will run him out of office as well. That is what happens when you lose the confidence of the parliament. They run you out. That does not happen in a republic. Trump stays there forever until he is not elected again. Right? So let's go on to bipartisanship. You say it will be bipartisan and there will be...
Information.
Accepted. Go ahead.
I just want to remind the member that on your side of the house that also happens because we're seeing problems with the Prime Minister or his party and they're not being thrown out of office.
Thank you. So, the level of the problems are also different. I'm sure Bruce Golding did not have a mob riot and come to Jamaica House and try to take over the place. That did not happen. Trump had a violent mob of the seat of democracy and he remained in power. Boris Johnson had a party and he was out. That is a difference. That is democracy working as it should. That is parliament working as it should. So going back to bipartisanship, you're saying that they will work together. What happens is, again, the penultimate republic, as pointed out by my member, he said that when Barack Obama was in power, they decided that the Republicans did not want him to pass anything. So they did not vote for his law, so nothing happened. And as pointed out in his first point, you will introduce a lot of bureaucracy, so nothing will happen. Because why would you allow a policy to pass if you don't believe in the leader that is passing it? So you won't have compromise. You'll have nothing happening. You'll have parliament or